welcome to another episode of the Jeepster build. I'm getting back to work on the dashboard. As you can see, I've got it in place and I'm just kind of familiarizing myself with where it left off. It's been a long time since I started building this dash. So as a recap, what I did is I got a 1950 Ford Deluxe dash. The original dash cluster was over in this area, and the dash to the Jeepster, in my opinion, I think they're just really plain and a boring flat dash. So I wanted to add some contours and some styling to this, but I wanted to keep the gauge cluster in the center. So by cutting that centerpiece out of the Ford, moving it over into the middle, kind of changing the contour, keeping the Ford glove box, what I did is I welded the original trim from the Jeepster to the back side of the modified dash. Now this dash in the Ford was wider, so I had to cut it down and narrow it. I had to narrow it here in the center, and I don't like this area of the dash. It's flat and not very contoured compared to this side, so it doesn't really blend well. So I want to modify this side to match this, and I want to bring this down a little bit more. So now that I'm getting back to it, I need to make sure that the gauge cluster fits in this. The original Ford gauge cluster, it had fuel gauge and temp gauge and alternator all built into it. It was a really nice piece. Well, to get that to work in the Jeepster with modern wiring and modern technology, temperature, I want a temperature gauge. I want preferably to have an RPM gauge. I wanted to build that all into this somehow, and I was hoping there was something in the aftermarket that was made for that, and lo and behold, there is. Classic Instruments does a modern gauge set for the 50 Ford. So I'm going to get that to work in here, and I need to make sure all of this is all lined up. So I kind of have to take a few steps back now at this point and verify all of these ribs and lines and how everything aligns before I really start tackling more of this. And I also need to make bracketry to better hold my steering column, because the steering column needs to have a good solid support. And I had to build in a solid support for the clutch and brake pedal. So I want to tie all that together too, and I want to mount the bottom side of this dash solid to the under bracing for the pedals and everything that I have that ties into the firewall and to this solid area. So that's what we'll do. I need to pull this back out now, get it over on a bench, then where I can start working on it and verify all these lines and structures and make sure that gauge fits. So this is the gauge that I was hoping to find, and everything about it just has that old analog look. No digital miles, it's the rotating mileage. We've got the temp, the volts, gas gauge, oil gauge, and the RPM that I was hoping to get. And it's just all in a really good looking face. And then it just slides in. Well, it looks like it slides in from the back. Awesome. That is a good looking dash. And it looks like the way it mounts, the way the brackets are, I was worried about how it was going to fit and stay horizontal. and it is fully adjustable on the back side. I was worried that these two mounting points were going to need to be aligned, but I'll just be able to make my own bracket that goes across the back that holds it into place. That is going to be really simple and easy to put in. And my wiring harness that I purchased has all the wires to connect to this with just a simple plug. Turn signals, high beam, it's just got everything all built into one nice piece. Wasn't cheap. $1,000 for this. But when you consider all the gauges that is all built into this, that sounds about right, actually. I started doing work right here in the corner. This area right here is just too low. I wanted to bring it up more so that it flows better across the top of the dash and the cowl area. And as I'm working on this area and I'm trying to get this glove box to fit correctly, the whole dash just kept twisting. From that corner to this corner, it just wanted to twist, and then I couldn't keep this fitting right. You can see I originally had tack welded this together, and then I was able to do all this work. So now that I've cut that tack, I need to go back in here and do a little bit more work and then finish up. You can see all these holes where I just spot welded it all together, or tack welded, I should say. And then this area is still too low, so I need to bring that up. I could just fill this with filler, but there's no reason to put that much filler in there. Just take a little extra time to bend this upwards. It's just a matter of heating it like I did here. Just heat it and tap it and get it to fit. And then you can see this real nice crisp line here. Well, that crisp line was on the other side as well, but when I stood back looking at the car, this line is up higher than this line. So I made a pattern of paper on this side, and then I was able to just flip it up and over and put it on that side, and that corner matches perfectly, but as it gets down along here, it's about a ½ inch off. In fact, you can see there's a little black mark there. This is where this side is now, and this is where it should be. So it's just a matter of tool and dollying, just hammer and dollying and making that line again crisp like this one. And then this line, you can see I did a black marker line on this side, and then I used my level and brought it all the way across over there. And it was just a little bit off there. So this was really easy to just retool it. And then this line down here, it looks like this is a little bit high again. But this side, I really like how this is radiused and contoured. But then over here, it's a square 90-degree angle. And I guess Ford did that because they had all the original knobs over here, the starter, windshield wiper, headlights, cigarette lighter, all those were along this flat spot. Well, I want to bring this area down, and I want to put my switches in this area. And I've got some really cool 57 Thunderbird switches that I'll put down here that I'm really excited about. So, in order to get all this done, it just made the most sense to mount it solid to the car again, and then start making all these cuts and tack welds, and then I'll be able to pull all this off and hopefully get it to stay square. And in order to do that, I might just have to weld this closed again, tack weld it into place so that everything will stay put while I make all these changes. This area, when it was over here, it was contoured flatter to match this panel so that the knobs were here. And I kind of tied all this in, and then I didn't like the way it looked. because it's still kind of flat. I want it to have more of that radius. So I'm going to cut this area out and radius that out. And this area is where I'm going to cut off, and I want to put in a rounded piece that matches this contour all across here, and then try to tie it in, and then I'm going to cut this area out and bring it down. That's where I'll put my knobs. And I may even bring it down further so that I can adapt in a radio or something. Preferably it'd be nice to have a radio, but I've seen where people have brought them way down and actually put in like an iPad type of little screen, but that's just too modern for what I want to do. So a simple radio, that's probably what makes the most sense. And I do want to put air conditioning in this. So with the heating and air conditioning system, I'm going to want to somehow tie in vents on this area and vents here too, as well as the switches. So that's just all the more reason why I need to bring this area down more. So we'll start by changing this contour, and then I'll start cutting this out and changing this contour as well. Slow and easy. So that now all ties in. So this end now, I want to start about right here. I will start by making that cut, and then I will just have to kind of estimate it down here once I get this material out of the way. This, I'm not sure what gauge this metal is, but it's exhaust pipe. And it just happened to be the perfect contour to go across the bottom of this. And this exhaust pipe, I think it's 2-inch, was not coated. So this is just raw steel. So it's great for working on something like this. And since my steering column and my pedals all tie into this area, it's really going to beef this up, as well as it's beefed up from the original Ford. You can see on the back side here all these holes that have been drilled over the years. Some are the original Ford and some have just been added. So I want to weld over all of these. I made marks of the ones that I need to keep. These two will mount to my clutch pedal and brake pedal, and the reinforcing up to the firewall, and then the center of these two are the center of my steering column. All the rest of these I can fill. Alright, that looks good. I will start by tack welding the ends of this in, and then I can bring this down. It's wanting to lift up on me. So if I tack weld both ends, and then I'll be able to just push this down and weld across. That's beautiful. I just need to continue this on down. And to do that, I need to cut a piece of this out. I want to follow this contour. So if I just cut out be a quarter of this, if I cut it in half and cut it, that will be my piece I need. So I started off by cutting this U-bend in half, and then I split that in half again this way, and I ended up with all these pieces. So in doing that, I laid them on the floor where they were flat, and I tack welded it together so that it would be perfectly flat, and then I could put a straight edge across this way and get it exactly where I wanted it. And that gave me the dimension I wanted from here to here to cut into the dash. And then my idea was to go ahead and slice this, take this off, and then piece it together to go across the bottom similar to here, but just bring it down a little bit more so that I can put in my knobs and maybe a radio or something like that. And then I got me thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll just do my knobs here and I'll put a radio below in the console that comes up from the floor. And then since I had this all tacked together, maybe I just leave it like this and just put a piece over this, and I could put my radio here and I could still tie in the console behind this. So I kind of like this, but I'm not really sure. So I need to get it in the car and get a really good visual before I go any further with this, whether I cut it up some more or just leave it and finish it. So I am planning on doing a console that kind of goes up underneath the back side of that. But now that I see it in place, it's just hanging down too far. Neat idea, but it just isn't going to quite work in my head. So I am going to cut this about halfway. So I need to cut this weld and then bring these two pieces down so it's a little more flush, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut all of this panel out and rebuild all of this once I get this bottom piece in. Well, I need to cut this all back apart and then I can start fitting this in again. Well, I've been cutting and trimming my puzzle pieces together here. I've got them everything tacked in, and then I've made up this corrugated template for a piece of metal I need to weld in there. And I really like that now. So I need to create a panel that goes up along the back side of this, and then when I do my console, I'll have something to tie that into. And then you can see here now, this is very unshapely. It just didn't all blend together. So now I can go back and cut this out. I cut all this piece in behind here so that I'll have a place to put in my knobs. And then weld that in, and then I'll start figuring out, okay, where do I want those? This is looking good. Once I've traced my template, just good old scissors. Got a little bit of trimming right here, but that'll give me a good layout now where I can cut this sheet metal out. It's a bit of a Frankenstein, but it's all pieced together and it has some nice balance to it. Symmetrical, and it doesn't hang down too far. And now when I do my console, I can just come right up to the back side of that. Finally, getting this together. Now I've just got a whole bunch of grinding to do and some filler. This dash is done.